Welcome to Vertical Thoughts, where we climb rocks with our minds. Welcome to Vertical Thoughts, we send with our brains.
I don't think you're sending with your brain on that one.
Welcome to Vertical Thoughts. We don't have an intro.
I like it.
Yeah, that felt good. Yeah.
Yeah, that felt good.
All right. Okay. Let's roll right into this.
Flash this podcast real quick,
dude.
Okay. Walk up, no beta, flashing this podcast,
dude. Thank you for that. That was very nice. So, welcome. First of all, just welcome. Welcome to myself as well, and also welcome to the listeners and viewers at home. And Mark, welcome.
Good to be here.
Today, we're starting things off hot and heavy with one of my oldest friends. Not in age. He's pretty old. Don't get me wrong. He's like 1,000, but old in the sense that I've known him for a long time. We're like brothers in that we're literally brothers. He's my brother.
It doesn't really get longer than that.
I'm the brother you never had.
Now you lost me. It's all right.
So
no, we've known each other for forever.
Yeah, Mark and I have been friends for a long time. Probably realistically, 3 years old, 4 years old, something like that.
Somewhere, yep.
Maybe 5 or 6. Maybe I'm going back too far. But we have pictures together, not in diapers, not like toddler age, but like very young kid age. So we're talking wearing like layered T-shirts. And no offense to anyone who wears layered T-shirts.
I was probably in a polo that my mom dressed me up in.
You know what? The polo beta, you can't go wrong. Everyone pulls harder in a polo. Climbing tips with Liam. So, by the way, I'm Liam Wynn. I'm the host and founder of Vertical Thoughts, the climbing podcast by climbers and for climbers. Mark, what is your title right now? You're setting right now, right?
I am setting, but I'm mainly the head coach at a gym up in Idaho Falls.
Oh, okay. What's the gym called?
The Edge.
The Edge in Idaho Falls. So Mark is the head coach and one of the setters. That's really cool. You've done it all when it comes to climbing. You've coached, you've set, you've sent, you coached me how to sent. Didn't go well, obviously, because we're here. I've jumped into media because I'm bad at climbing specifically. But the real story that people want to hear is how our climbing related friendship began. And mostly, I'll sum it up and let you dive into it a little deeper, but more or less it consisted of you and your brother peer pressuring me into climbing for years. Years. And we're just like, nah, I don't want to do that. Nah, I'm good, dude. Not really interested. Thank you. And then one day I was just like, fine.
Yeah, like after I moved to Idaho, he's like, oh yeah, I think it'd be great to get into climbing right now. All right.
Dude, it was before that. It was sophomore year of high school, towards the end of high school. I was angsty. I was done in general. And I was like, what I got to do to find a little bit of solace here, to get a little peace of mind. What do I got to do? Quit soccer. Arguably one of the most detrimental decisions I've ever made, but it didn't feel right anymore to be playing soccer. And then finally I was like, you know what, Mark and Tanner, my dudes, I'll go with you to the climbing gym. Let's try this out. And then the following day I was like, where do you buy the shoes that make you not slip off the wall?
That's pretty funny. That's like the same story for how I started climbing. I was just really frustrated with school and kind of had it. You were there, you knew.
Yeah.
And I just needed a vent, and I just started climbing. And my dad grew up climbing and kind of tried to get me into it, but I got my arm stuck in a rock and traumatized me as a child, so I swore to never rock climb again. And then later on, my cousin introduced me to climbing at the gym he worked at, and I was like, this is really fun. And you could relate to this, where you just get on the wall and everything else just disappears. And you could be super stressed out, have the worst day ever, get on the wall, and it's like, oh, everything's fine. For me, it was very relaxing.
It's very therapeutic. It is, and I used the word solace before, and that's a good word because for me, it provides basically a mental barricade where all I can think about is like what's happening in the moment. And it's very here and now. It's very physically demanding, so you have to be very focused on your body and what your body's doing, especially when you begin to ascend to the higher levels of climbing, I would say like V4, V5 and above, you really have to pay attention to your entire body, what every part of you is. If any part of your body is unaccounted for, it's yanking you off the wall, like 100% of the time. And I found that more recently when I actually started climbing. And not that I haven't been climbing for years, but I have sucked for years, and now I'm like getting okay at it. But I found that a lot of parts of my body, like a foot every once in a while, or my hips, or something would just be unaccounted for on the wall, and it would just be directly working against me in terms of climbing up the wall.
The smallest little difference. Like, my foot needed to be 2 inches to the left, and now I can do that move every single time.
Oh yeah, even if it's not on a hold, just smear 2 inches farther than you were. But it's crazy. Never have I experienced a sport that is so whole body intensive in a mental way. In other words, you have to be very focused on what's happening with your entire body at all times. And I think that's why it's so therapeutic, is because I don't have the mental bandwidth to be able to think about anything else while rock climbing other than what my body is doing. Otherwise, I'm falling off climbs. And when I start to fall off climbs, then I start to think about everything else that I hate about my life. Not that I hate my life, because I love my life a lot, actually. But the negative stuff really comes out when you start to fail at something you love. And that's a struggle in rock climbing. Rock climbing's hard, dude. I mean...
Well, it's really just expressive of yourself. I mean, the wall is never going to change. The only thing that changes is you. And I know this is like the most generic climbing conversation ever, but when you get on the wall and you get frustrated afterwards and everything kind of swarms back on you, it's because really every single time you get on the wall and you have those little victories of ascends, it's like a personal victory. It's a personal win. And when you fail, everything else just kind of gets piled back on. Like, oh, I didn't ascend today and I got these problems.
That's right. Yep. I didn't send today and rent is due next week. And it all comes crashing down. And so it's the nature of the beast. The climbing gives and climbing takes, and sometimes climbing taketh away. But lately I've been really feeling it. I slightly injured myself recently in terms of just strained tendons in both my right elbow and my right fingers. And I was very sad. I was a very sad boy when I came off that wall, and I released tension and I felt, the feel. It's not necessarily pain even. It's just like a weird feeling. Something feels off inside your body. And I was just like, this is terrible news. Someone fix this immediately so I don't have to stop climbing. But I only took a week off and I'm feeling pretty much better. So by no means was I injured. But
that's lucky.
Yeah. I was being stupid. I deserved to be injured. So, it's good that I didn't. But
yeah.
So when did you start seriously climbing?
I think I was 15, so I actually got like a pretty late start, considering, especially now where everyone starts at like 6 years old. I look at all the kids on my team and how young some of them are, and I realize that's a huge advantage. But for me, I'm really happy with when I started. I mean, I grew up really tiny, and so I started climbing before my growth spurt. And once I started growing, I mean, I just started progressing through grades like nothing. And I really believe it's because I understood how to overcome that weakness of height to begin with. I developed a really dynamic style, and later on that just manifests itself on harder grades.
I like that. That's good. So I still find myself being held back by height. Our gym's really tall. My home gym, a Vital climbing gym in Murrieta, just tall walls. Just for whatever reason, so when someone designed that gym, they were like, hey, you know what sucks? Climbing like medium height or shorter walls. We only climb huge walls here, so suck it up, Buttercup, because our cave's going to be 25 feet tall. And it's just like, it's cool, and you always are like, hey, it's going to season you a little bit. It's going to make you a little more used to height. You're going to feel more comfortable outdoors because of it, or taking falls. Your technique for falling is going to get better. I'm like, whoa, or I'm just not going to climb in the cave. Adverse effects. Climbing giveth and climbing taketh away. But height is a very limiting factor, because I find the higher up I get, the less body control I have, because I start to think about how high up I am. And it doesn't happen very often, but it happens enough to bother me, where when I'm high up and I'm doing, especially like you described, something dynamic, something committing, the moves get way harder. Not necessarily more difficult, but way physically harder to overcome, because your body is telling you, like, here are the risks involved. The cost-benefit ratio is through the roof. You need to take it easy here so you don't fall and break your neck. But you just got to not think about it. It's the only thing. And that's the word. That's some that's some 2003 like scary movie about to fall off the side of the tall building. And don't look down, you know. Just look down, but like also like accept that you're high up and that you're over a pad. If you're in a gym, if you're outside, hopefully you got decent spotters and et cetera, you're probably going to be okay. And if you're not okay, dude, best way to get hurt.
Yep. Well, I don't know if I agree with that last one, but really, for me, everyone has a fear of falling. No one likes hitting the ground hard. No one enjoys that, and it's definitely a major part of climbing. And for me, something that helped me to get over it is, you mentioned my brother earlier. Me and my brother started climbing at the same time, and we both got really to it at the same time. And so when we started pushing each other, our climbing really, not only as we progressed, not only did our climbing further develop, but so did our relationship. And not just as brothers, but as climbing partners. And whenever I had those doubts or those fears enter my mind, like everyone does, I was able to just instantly think, I've got Tanner, he's going to spot me, and I'll be fine. Or he's going to get this catch. I know it's a good whipper, but I'll be fine. And it was just because we trusted each other and our relationship developed with our climbing. And so, I mean, if there was like any one thing I could say to someone to help them progress in climbing, it's to find a partner that not only do they trust, but that they can develop a climbing relationship with, where it's not an overnight relationship. Hey, let's meet at the gym and go do a couple routes together, where you are out, you're having those terrifying moments together, you're understanding each other's judgment calls and when they make decisions and how they make decisions. And once you start understanding their rationale and you understand the decision-making process on their end, you're much more capable of trusting them quite literally with your life when things get hairy on the wall.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that dynamic between you two has always been extremely obvious to me, even in gym climbing. It's almost like you guys can see each other's moves, one move before you make it. And, climbing with each other, falling with each other, even the approach together, as two brothers heading into a situation like that. It is a very strong bond, and I'm sure it does help, to have someone like that with you and on your back at all times. And Tanner's a whippy little boy. I can't imagine spotting him outdoors, to be frank. I've spotted you outdoors, and I was horrified the entire time. But that's just because you guys have that trust not only in your partners, but also in your own bodies. You know what I mean? To be able to make moves. And I think a lot of people are held back by that same trust both ways. You know what I mean? Is the person behind me on board, and is my own body on board, like with what I'm about to do? And I always think that every time I'm about to go for a really hard move, and sometimes I surprise myself, just pull and squeeze, you know what I mean? And sometimes you stick moves that you really didn't think you were capable of sticking, but bottom line is you can, once you trust yourself to be able to.
Yeah. And I think you just have to place your trust elsewhere. Like, if you keep pushing off the thought will always return. But if you replace it with trust, it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. So that's a powerful brother dynamic. And you guys, Marc and Tanner, the dynamic duo, the Blocker brothers, growing up with you two, and especially climbing with you two when we climbed, during probably my 3 to 4 year stint at the Hangar 18 gyms here in Southern California. You guys climbed there for a bit longer, but, pretty much everyone knew who you guys were. And that's kind of a byproduct of being good at rock climbing, is that people tend to watch, you know what I mean? That people go into the gym, and even casual climbers tend to be drawn towards people that are climbing the hardest, even if it's just mob mentality, even if it's just, a certain number of people are watching one person climb, other people will join in and watch them climb. And you guys have always been really fun to watch climb, and especially when you're climbing together, because you have extremely different styles. I mean, like polar opposite climbing styles. And to me, that is the coolest thing to watch, two people who climb both at a very high level, but who do it very differently. I think it's extremely interesting to watch. So how do you find that Tanner's climbing and Tanner's style, having a totally different body type, by the way, has influenced your climbing or has helped you develop your own style?
Yeah, I probably like earlier I said, I have a pretty dynamic style. Tanner's pretty short and he's much stockier. And I mean, I would say my build tends to lean me towards probably like overhanging, steep stuff. Where Tanner's, like when I think of Tanner, I just think crack climber. I mean,
Yeah.
he has that mental determination, and I think above all everything else, that is what makes him a good climber. And he's very dynamic as well because he has to be because of his height. But and he's really powerful. He's really entertaining to watch. What what I think is important in our relationship is we both had different perspectives for looking at any one problem or route. And we were both climbing at the same grade, so we'd walk up to a problem or a route and be looking at it and start trying to diagnose the best ways of doing it. And it wasn't always the exact same for both of us, but usually there was a sequence that catered to Tanner's climbing, and he could, spill beta for me and help talk me through that section, and vice versa. And that really helped to round us out as climbers, because we were forced to work with each other's strengths, and we compensated for our own weaknesses by doing so.
Yeah, that's good. And it's always good, in my opinion, healthy to watch other people climb. I find climbing is like anything else in life. There's always someone who's better than you are. Even, and this is going to sound weird, but even if there's someone who doesn't climb at as high of a grade as you do, even if there's someone who climbs lower grades than you do, always watch other people climb, because you'll pick up something. You'll always learn something from you. You always have something to learn from everyone in general, but especially with rock climbing, everyone's body moves differently. Everyone controls their movement differently. Everyone does things differently, and there's not always a right way to do something. Sometimes it's just, get yourself up the wall however you can, and everyone has different methods of doing that. And I would agree with Mark, or Tanner is very encouraging to watch climb, because he is very powerful. And I find him, when I climbed with him recently, I climbed with him actually about a week ago in my gym, and he kind of walked through my projects and then walked through the climbs that I can't even get on because they're too hard for me. And it's very impressive, it is, but he's built that. It's something that he was not gifted with. No one gave him that. And same thing with you. You guys kind of had to earn that together. Do you think that the rat race, I guess you could call it, has helped you guys progress? Do you think it steepened your learning curve, having someone like Tanner to kind of push you to get stronger and stronger, and you guys both fighting for the same climbs? I know recently getting into the upper, double-digit V-scale climbs, you guys, for a while, you were maybe a little bit ahead of Tanner when you guys were competing growing up. And then, of course, you took a 2-year mandatory hiatus from rock climbing. And Tanner took that, man, he saw an opportunity, and he was like, yeah, when Mark comes back, yeah, I'm going to be he's going to get smoked, because he got so strong.
He got very strong while I was gone. And I wouldn't even say that I was a better climber than Tanner. It honestly just came down to what we were on and whose style it fit better. Now he's a much stronger climber than I am, but at the time it was, oh man, this is Tanner's style, and he's going to just totally whip me on this. I got to step up my game. Otherwise, I'm just going to face the humiliation beatdown. And yeah, there's definitely like a sibling rivalry going on, and I think it's good, and I think it's fun. And not everyone agrees with that, but I really enjoyed it. And I haven't met any pair of brothers who has a better relationship than me and Tanner. And watching, and I'm just being honest. I mean, obviously I'm very biased, but but especially as the climbing partners, we do feed off each other really well, and I think it helps to keep us both motivated and psyched. And I mean, talking to Tanner about when I was gone, and then he was gone for a while as well. I mean, both of us had a really, really hard time keeping the psych up and staying motivated to stay on the wall without each other to feed off of, because we didn't have our climbing partner. I mean, whether we were on routes or bouldering or developing, we were always with each other, always climbing with each other, and it just wasn't the same vibe when you went out climbing by yourself as with people you enjoy being around. And that goes with like other climbing friends I have too. It's just it was more specific with Tanner.
Yeah, I can totally see that. And it was obvious to me, beginning climbing with you guys kind of got me into climbing and both coached me. And I would get, sometimes conflicting beta from one of you or from the other one, but you both could do the beta you were giving to me, which, was always very helpful to watch.
Bless our poor climbing team.
Yes, that's true. Yes. And that kind of segues me into my next question, or my next topic that I want to discuss is, you guys, In my opinion, I don't know if this is statistically correct, but in my opinion, it seems like when you guys started climbing, relatively quickly you got into competing, in the competitive rock climbing scene, as opposed to just maintaining a casual. Some people maintain a casual climbing mindset all the way up into like the V10 to V12 range, and they have no desire ever to compete against other people. Totally fine. Probably, to be honest, more of my style. However, I do sometimes wish that I had started competing when I was younger, specifically in youth leagues. I wish that's something I would have done. How did competing when you were younger kind of drive your climbing? How was competition compared to casual climbing, I guess?
Okay, so you'll think this is really entertaining, but me and Tanner hated competing. We went because we loved hanging out with our friends and the community and the vibe and everything, but it was very, very hard for us to justify going to the gym on a weekend, especially when the weather was good and we could be climbing outside. So that was like the biggest deterrent for us to ever compete, was why would we go waste a weekend in a gym when we could go outside? But what was awesome about the competitions is you're able to meet all these other climbers. And our first competitions, we got smoked. I mean, I took last, and I think Tanner took last. I mean, we got totally creamed early on. But it was really exciting to go and meet other climbers who are climbing your same grade or at least your age, and seeing what they were capable of and letting that push you as well. And so it's a great spot to go and meet people and develop new relationships with other climbers and learn about their projects. Hey, what are you guys working on outside? And I want to go get on that too. That sounds awesome. And especially when they're working the same, they're around the same level as you. And also, like we were discussing earlier, seeing all the different perspectives. But the competition, I mean, climbing competitions they're interesting. I mean, I'm a coach, so I have to be careful what I say. But they're a great opportunity to network and connect with the community and get a feel for the community. But it's definitely rapidly evolving. I mean, the differences from when me and Tanner were competing to now, it's gotten a lot more serious, a lot more competitive, and there's a lot of big players out there now. And you don't have to hear about them on in a magazine or anything to know they're good. I mean, some of the strongest climbers I've ever met have just been at competitions lately, and it's just insane that these people aren't sponsored. And like, honestly, double digits doesn't matter anymore. Like, V10 used to be a huge deal. I mean, I was just talking to someone today, and he was like, yeah, V10 doesn't mean anything. Like, you have to be climbing V13 plus to be considered a solid climber. Well, not a solid climber, that's wrong, but just be considered a really high-level climber, because there's so many people climbing that hard now.
Yeah, it's very interesting the way that has happened recently, and I've watched it happen very closely because I've been very involved in climbing media for the last few years, as I'm sure you probably have as well. And I've been blown away by the number of people putting out these hard climbs. I mean, it used to be, the big names, like you said, Chris Sharma, you know what I mean? When he sets, 14 to 15 outdoors, you're not that surprised. But nowadays, you got all these people crushing, 14, 15, 16, and the numbers are just getting higher and higher. Of course, you've got Nale, who's always, first V17 ever done. He's amazing. You've got Chris Sharma, of course.
Asterisk.
Same story. Right. True. Yeah. Pending someone else to climb it, I guess. But now you've got Daniel Woods, Keenan Takahashi, all these people who have been around in the scene for a while, but are really pushing the limits right now, especially in outdoor bouldering.
Well, and then all the time you just hear like random people like, "Hey, I put up a V14." And you're, what? That's insane. 514. I mean, it took me forever to meet. I mean, it wasn't until last year that I met someone who actually had climbed 514 outdoors, and I ran into him outdoors on a 514, and I was like, holy cow, there's actually people who climb this hard. Like, there's a lot of them. It's not like a few about, like, there's so many people who climb really hard. And I think growing up in Southern California, the climbing community is actually very different from, let's say, Utah, Colorado, and obviously there's very little climbing community in Idaho. But when I was climbing out of Utah, I mean, there's so many people who are just cranking insanely hard outdoors because it's literally in their backyard. They just jump in their car, drive 20 minutes, and it's the same distance to like up American Fork Canyon or any of the canyons right there. That it's insane that they climb so hard and so readily outdoors. They're pretty lucky.
Yeah, yeah. And like you touched on before, people that you'll never hear of, people that, unless you found their Instagram, you'll never hear
Yeah.
even their name. You won't even remember their name next time you hear it because they're just normal dudes, normal girls outside, even inside, crushing. And I find that even in the gym, it seems like the average climber is a lot better than they used to be. I remember, probably 5 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, climbing in a gym. If you climbed above V4, you were an above average climber in the gym. Like a lot of the gym climbers were 2, 3, 5'9", 5'10" climbers. Now I feel like in my home gym, the average climber is climbing V6, and I'm like, dude, I don't even know what to do with that. Like, I'm not even in the upper percentile anymore. So it's just like, and of course it doesn't matter, but it holds significance in the fact that the general average climber is getting better. And I think that speaks a lot to the future of the sport of rock climbing, because I think pretty soon, V0 to V3 are going to be all just a V1, you know what I mean? And then it's all going to get pushed up on the grading scale, because we do have an open-ended grading scale in the V scale, and the font scale is the same way. It's open-ended. There is no hardest climb. You know what I mean? There's just the hardest climb that has been done up to this point. And I think that speaks to the future of rock climbing in a really positive way. I think there's also just a greater concentration of people climbing. Gyms, crags, everything's more busy now than it used to be. And it's because climbing is moving into the spotlight. We're having climbing in the Olympics. More people are watching climbing. The viewership has really skyrocketed the last few years. And I see just tons of people at local climbing gyms at all times, and they're having fun. They go, they buy memberships, you know what I mean? They start to climb. Yeah. There are people that have never done it before. They walk in and they get a taste of a V3 or a V4 or something they can sink their teeth into, what we call a project. People are hooked. I mean, people are loving rock climbing right now, and I think that's a really cool change to how much of a niche sport it was, again, like 5 years ago. I mean, when we were in high school, who else in our high school rock climbed? Maybe one other person, maybe two?
Yeah, no. And I talked to my sister, and she goes to the gym all the time with her friends, and it's really weird. Because, as you know, none of my friends would ever come climbing with me.
Terrible friends.
Terrible friends.
Horrible.
But, the gym is dangerous territory.
Yes.
It has definitely come with its trade-offs. I mean, the grades and how hard people are pushing the sport is insane, but it's definitely lost a lot of climbing character, I would say. It's almost like it's a fad, in the sense that people are rock climbers, and this is my image. And before, to be a climber, it was super unique, and like, I don't want to sound hipster, but it was really just a really niche activity, because there was this huge barrier of entry. You go outside and you look at these people climbing these cliffs, and they look at all these ropes and these knots and these harnesses and gear, and it's really overwhelming to get introduced to that and learn. Before, you'd have to develop all the technical skills long, and by technical skills I mean rope skills, long before you would develop your own personal climbing. And now that barrier of entry is gone with climbing gyms. I mean, our gym's set up where there's just two auto-locking carabiners, and one clips into the person, and the other one's already set up with the gree and clips into the belayer. And it's depressing, honestly, that you have all these people and they're climbers climbing relatively hard, and they can't tie a figure eight or coil a rope or much less understand the complexities of climbing ethics outdoors, and like, especially like if you get into developing or anything like that. And it's really, I'm glad that there's still traditionalists out there who are pushing the sport and developing areas, opening areas, especially on the developing side. I mean, but there's definitely a clash there that I hope people start to notice more.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Climbing in and of its roots is being kind of phased out by a new generation of climber. A new generation of casual climber who's kind of treats it as a novelty. You know what I mean? It's not a sport. It's not a lifestyle. It's a novel thing.
And even on the sports side, I mean, I compare the competitions I go to now as a coach compared to when I was a competitor. I mean, it's dead silent. Before, if someone was on the wall and they got that move further or anything, every single person in that audience would be cheering them on. Now it's like their coach and the other team members because it's so competitive. And it's depressing for me that I'm there cheering on kids. Like I'm looking at their scorecard, seeing what their name is, and yelling at them like, "Yeah, you got this! Like awesome job, keep going!" And I'm like, people like walk up to me and be like, "Hey, that's really cool that you do that." And it's like, well, this was how everyone was. I don't know how in 4 years that was lost, and it's pretty sad, and it really reflects the shift from honestly more of a community to a sport.
That's good. I like that. From a climbing community into a group of athletes all competing, and that really is the difference between then and now. And we can only hope that it'll even itself out. You used the word fad earlier, and I think that's a correct way to describe it. I think it is a fad, and as much as I don't want the popularity to die, I think the fad that is rock climbing will pass. You know what I mean? People will find something else to be super interested in, and I think hopefully the viewership will stay the same because it's important for climbing as a sport to maintain high and even growing viewership numbers. We need that to progress. We need that to provide capital and resources to companies who develop products and things that we use, and also for professionals who do this for a living. They, their paychecks need to come from somewhere. And in general, with any kind of professional athlete, that's viewership. You know what I mean? That's the consumers. That's the people watching it. Yep. It's not the people at the local gym. We don't pay the rock climbers to be professional rock climbers. In fact, if you took a survey of all the people in the gym, let's say who climb V8 and above, you go into a local gym and talk to all the strong climbers, those guys probably don't even like the pros. They probably wouldn't even want to meet the pros. You know what I mean? They just want to climb harder than them. And I think that comes from that sense of competition where it's like, but is that guy really that good? And I'm like, yes, dude, it's Chris Sharp. He's that good. Like, this is our godfather. Like, I don't know. What are you asking me? I don't understand. And I think people like you and me, or I don't want to use the term dying breed. I think that's more excessive. I think there's a lot of people like us still at the gym and at the local crag, but, climbers by nature. We love climbing. We love climbers, watching climbing. We really take something, part of our spirit really connects with something about rock climbing. It really helps us move through that. But in sticking with the topic of the local gym and how it has changed, and specifically ethics, climbing ethics, kind of going out the window, I would firmly agree with that. I do see a very strong lack of climbing ethics and just manners in the gym. Something as simple as, hey, I see you're working this climb. Do you mind if I try it? You know what I mean? Just ask before climbing a climb. Even if you've done it before, even if they walk away, you know what I mean? If they're still looking, if the person who was projecting a climb and obviously struggling is still in the area, ask them before hopping on their climb. It's the way it's always been. It's the way Dad does it. It's the way we do it. That's the way it should be. And specifically with terms of climbing ethics, what are your thoughts on a very common occurrence that we see happening in the gym? I'm sure you see it, I see it. We both even probably participate, but what are your thoughts on beta spraying? You know what I mean? Just people hosing other people in the gym down with unwanted or unnecessary beta.
I'm a coach, so my job is to beta spray.
Of course.
And I am very guilty of this. And in the gym, I don't care as much in the gym as I do outdoors. Outdoors, I try to always ask, like, before talking to someone about how they're, what I think might be a better idea. Like, and I think it's good and bad. If it's warranted, I think it's great. If you're just going around spraying beta to make it seem like you're a good climber, it's really obvious that you're not. So it can help you and it can hurt you. I mean, when I sit down with like Tanner or anyone else, and it's the easiest way for me to understand how good of a climber is how they talk about rock climbs and problems and like just all the above. And I could sit down and talk to someone for a minute and a half and probably be able to guess how hard they're climbing, just because how they talk. And I'm sure you've noticed it with people in the gym. And
oh yeah,
I think it's good and I think it's bad. I mean, everyone beta sprays at their level, and so when you start trying to beta spray, well, I guess it gotta be dangerous saying everyone, because there are some people who are vehemently against it. Which, I mean, okay, how'd you find this rock climb? How do you know what it's named? How do you know what grade it is? Because that's all beta.
Exactly.
So, I mean, it's like, where's the limit? Like, hey, this is this rock climb. This is what it's called. This is who put it up. This is the grade. They just told you a decent amount of information.
Yeah, you just got hosed.
Yeah, I mean, and most of the time that's what it is. Like, oh, this line's going to follow this crack up and it's going to cut left and whatever it is. But and if you're going move by move, I mean, that's kind of obnoxious. Usually if someone's sitting there working a sequence over and over again, I could tell they're getting frustrated and I could see something obvious that they're doing wrong. I might ask them, like, or just be like, hey, you know, when I did this rock climb, this is how I did it. Or would you like some help with this? And I don't do that with people who don't already know me. I try to avoid just walking up to a complete stranger and being, hey, this is how you do this rock climb, and then leave. I try to get engaged, try to work it with them for a little while. And like sometimes, a lot of times so I'll just leave it like that.
I like that. Yeah. So, and I have very simple rules for beta spraying. It is a necessary evil. It's part of the sport. You have to do it sometimes. Someone has to do it. You know what I mean? Because first of all, like, you know, there's, like you said, there's no climbing without someone telling you, hey, I used that and that and that, especially outdoors. My rules for beta spraying indoor are very simple. Don't spray up, like you said. In other words, if you can't do the climb, you just keep your mouth shut. I mean, just like, you may have a good idea and that's cool, but if someone is working a climb that's way above your grade range, you know what I mean? If you're climbing V6, V7 and someone's on a V10, in general, unless they are like, because someone like that oftentimes is not going to be looking around the gym like, you guys over there, I see you guys are working that V5, you know, what's the beta for that? You know, like, they're going to be looking towards people who climb the same level as them. They're going to be like, hey, you know, let me bounce this off you. I know. And climbing is a measurable sport, but it also is not, because anyone can give good advice or give beta. But I think in general, and I think this applies specifically to what you were saying, to someone you don't know, do not spray up in terms of beta. If it's your buddy and they climb harder than you and you're like, dude, I see something that you can't see up on the wall, let me hit you with it. Absolutely. If it's someone that you don't know personally, don't be like, hey man, I see you working that really hard climb. Did you happen to see that foot? Like, to me, it's condescending and in kind of an unintentional way. And I think it all has to do with intentions. You know what I mean? What are your intentions when you're telling that to someone? But I think, like you said, it's what it comes down to is, do you know the person? Are you actively engaging in their climbing experience, or are you just spraying and walking away? You know what I mean? Are you just like, hey, by the way, you're doing it wrong? You know, that's very impolite. And something that I found has happened to me, and when I've gotten most angry about it, is actually not with myself. Although there is one time in my life when I was trying a very hard, very unique, we'll say, competition style climb, and just getting hosed by this guy that I had never met before. I'll be honest, I wanted to sucker punch him in the throat. I wanted to give him the German suplex, but I didn't. You know what I mean? I just smiled and said like, hey, I appreciate it, because that's what you do. That's climbing manners. But when I get most angry about it is when I'm with my girlfriend Brooke in the climbing gym and people beta spray her because she's a woman. And that drives me nuts, because it's like, there's a lot of really strong women out there who are a lot better than us, and it has nothing to do with them being a woman. It's just they put in the work and they put in the time. And I find in the gym, I do see, maybe it's cultural, maybe it depends on the area you're in, or your gym even, or the attitude in your gym. But I do find, unfortunately, a lot of people indoors tend to maybe speak down to women in terms of their rock climbing. And that frustrates me more than anything else, just because sexism or being misogynistic in any way just angers me. But especially when I see that brought into rock climbing, a sport where there's no place for that. You know what I mean? Women have been rock climbing just as long as men have been rock climbing. It's the nature of the sport. We've always done it together. And there's no reason to talk down to someone else for a silly reason like that. But moving outwards from beta spraying, coaching, route setting, climbing, indoors, outdoors, competing, you've done it all. You know, you've done the ringer of rock climbing, and you've settled now.
Not big walls. I need to hit more big walls.
That's true. Big walls, maybe do some free solos.
No, thank you.
Okay, yeah, I figured as much. I was doing an integrity check with you. Just make sure you're still
Gotcha.
there. So, you've really, in terms of working within the climbing space, short of, I guess, like working at Epic TV, you know what I mean? You've walked around everything that is inside the rock climbing space. And I guess short of maybe just working as a desk jockey at a climbing gym, you haven't really ever done that either. But hey, that's just pretty much a stepladder to, I don't want to say a real job in rock climbing, but operating within the rock climbing space in a meaningful way, coaching, route setting, outdoor photography, all the stuff that you've done. How do you feel that it has influenced you in the moment when you are on the wall while rock climbing?
I'm sorry, you cut out there for a second. What was that?
So that all the things you've done, how do they influence you when you're on the wall, when you're going move by move?
I um honestly, the biggest thing that's influenced me is probably coaching and being coached. It really makes a big difference. And I'm able to sit and watch 20 kids try problems at every different grade level, and each one of them has a unique style, a unique build, and understanding why and how they are successful and they're able to pull off moves and learning to understand their unique style has been incredibly beneficial in allowing me to be better at reading data, reading routes, and diagnosing my own climbing. And it's allowed me to be much more self-aware of my climbing. But honestly, like other than that, photography I love, uh, and I love going out and taking pictures of routes. And honestly, I think my love for photography stemmed from my love of climbing instead of vice versa. And what has always appealed to me is getting on problems or routes that push me and are aesthetically pleasing. And that's the best part about climbing is you get to go to some of the most beautiful locations in the world and oftentimes be there by yourself, pushing yourself as hard as you can and enjoying this incredibly private and personal victory. And that's something that I think is awesome. And when you get to capture that in a picture, I think is really cool as well. But I I don't think it necessarily is influences my climbing rather than is influenced by it. The only thing that really directly influences my climbing is probably coaching.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And having to, I like that you use the word diagnose. That's a very accurate way to describe what you have to do in rock climbing. Is really go through a flow chart. You know what I mean, of checks and balances, and check this, and if this, then check this. If not this, then check that. You know what I mean? It's really you really just go down the flow chart of things and find out what suits someone or your or someone else's style of climbing. And I can see that being a very positive thing. Now, in terms of outdoor photography, so you have what I speak up and consider to be a famous photo that circulates out there. I've seen your photo in places outside of direct contact with you. I've seen your photo reposted in many places, and it was a photo that was it in Rock and Ice magazine?
Yeah, it won the Mammoth Every Man Exposed challenge.
That's right. That's right. So they had the online competition. Everyone voted for the best photo, and yours won. And I'll put the photo up on the screen. It's every time I look at it, I'm very impressed. It's a breathtaking photo, and it really captures what you're talking about in terms of just the sheer beauty of what rock climbing is. And that's talk a little bit about the photo and what was happening at the time, where you were, and who the climber is, et cetera, et cetera.
So who the climber is a guy. I honestly don't even remember his name. We were up at Black Mountain for an evening, and it was full moon. And I wanted to get an awesome picture of Tour de France. And this guy was a helicopter pilot. That's what I remember about him. He was a helicopter training instructor. And his job was just to fail helicopters and then watch the student stress out and try to reboot it or whatever that would be. I mean, I'm not a pilot, but
wow,
that's all I remember about the guy, though. I don't even remember his name. I just remember hanging out with him and being like, hey, you want to go climb Tour de France? He was like, yeah, sure. And so I went out with him and my brother and a couple of my other climbing buddies and my dad, and just really, I got really lucky. Everything just kind of came together perfectly. I don't know how interested everyone is who's listening to this is in photography, but I used a technique called light painting, and I combined it with a flash from another camera to essentially allow me to take a long exposure picture and at the same time capture rapid movement with the flash. So the flash acted like a shutter speed. Again, I don't want to get super into photography, but I got really lucky, honestly. There was some beautiful clouds in the background. The moon was just perfectly in line with the boulder, and everything just kind of came together. And I there's not a whole lot of story behind it. It's just it's
Right
one of
time,
those things
right
where you
place.
go out climbing and you get to see some incredible stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I like the photo a lot. It's a very good photo. And obviously, like you said, I think that's probably the culmination of what a lot of great pictures comes to is, hey, this just kind of happened. I met whatever the criteria was in that specific moment, and I happened to try a couple new techniques, and it really came together. And Good job on that. That's awesome. And I don't know if I ever even congratulated you at the time, but I do think that's really cool. Something, I hope you have an issue of that Rock and Ice magazine laying around somewhere that you can keep.
I got it somewhere.
Cool. Yeah. So, outdoor photography, indoor climbing, outdoor climbing, it's all part of the big giant clock that is rock climbing. We're all just cogs, both existentially in real life and in rock climbing, of course. But it's been very interesting, to talk about this stuff and to hear your perspective on it. Now, I have a very simple question for you, and there's a very simple answer, but I'm going to throw it at you. Do you prefer a crimp, a sloper, or a pinch, and why?
I used to love crimps, and then I took my little break, and I came back, and I can't crimp for anything. So I love slopers because they're nice on my fingers.
Nice. Okay, good answer. Unfortunately, it's incorrect. The correct answer was doesn't matter. They're all jugs. So moving forward.
Oh, gotcha.
So moving forward, we're gonna start to wrap things up here. We've covered a lot of good ground in this particular interview, and I'm happy that we did it. I started off this first episode with one of my closest friends, one of my oldest friends, and the person who brought me into rock climbing. And Marc gets first dibs. This guy tried for a long time to get me into rock climbing, and I owe him a lot for that, because climbing has become my personal safe space, and it's something that. Like he mentioned before, I was very small and very weak until I started rock climbing, and even up until recently, I've almost doubled my muscle mass to a point where you look at old pictures of me, you look at new pictures of me, you're looking at a new man, and we're not talking any kind of Captain America transformation, but truly, I'm able to carry myself with a little bit of pride now, thanks to rock climbing and thanks to the dedication and the things that it's taught me now. Marc, is there anything else you'd like to say before we wrap things up?
No, thanks for letting me come on. I really enjoyed it.
Of course, my dude, my brother. And one more thing before we wrap things up, we have a question for the fans, the listeners, the viewers, wherever you're watching this, wherever you are right now. I want to know, when you look at a climb for the first time, indoors or outdoors, what is the first thing you see? In my personal experience, there are three options. Sometimes you have a person who looks at a climb and sees the beta. All they see is the movement that's going to be required to get to the top. And I'm talking that very first instant, the very first gut reaction when you look at a climb. Some people, like me, see the holds. The first thing I look at tends to be the holds. I say, oh, those look heinous, or those crimps are so small, or that sloper looks amazing. I'm a sloper guy like Marc. Or the first thing you look at is you see the tag, or you see the grade, or you look in the guidebook and you see that's a V9 or that's a V11, or I want to do that. So do you see the beta, the holds, or the grade? Comment below, or tweet at me, or at YFoxel on Twitter. You can also find us on Instagram at vertical.thoughts. Tweet at Marc. Marc's all over the place. Go find Marc and tweet at him what you see first when you look at a climb. Do that for me, and also just say Father Liam sent me. But go ahead and answer that in the comment section below if you're on YouTube, or tweet at me, or find us on Instagram. And with that, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up the very first episode of the Vertical Thoughts podcast. Marc, thanks for joining. Thanks for coming out, my boy.
Thank you very much.
And we'll see everyone next time.